The second thing that I want to seed that I want to plant in our discussions throughout the day is about how we really move into social change, into cultural change. It's just a brief anecdote. It comes from New Hampshire last year, from the great event that New Hampshire held, statewide event. They brought me in to speak, how they turned out 1,000 people for a day of workshops, and here in my sermon, et cetera. I don't know. They did it in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, in the middle of the presidential primaries. Imagine that. And the day was terrific. At the end of the day, a father stood up, about this many people. He stood up at the end of the day of workshops and said, "This has been terrific. What a great day." He talked about how energized he was, how much respect he had for the people that were there, programs that were there. But he said something interesting. He said, "But something is troubling me a little bit, which is today we've mainly talked about programs. Yes, we need more programs. Yes, the existing programs that have been out there for a long time need more funding. We need to figure out a way to do that. We need new programs. We can't do this alone. And yet, we've had programs, and this problem has only grown worse with nature deficit disorder. So what's missing from this?" And he asked this very interesting question. He said, "I have a creek that runs through my neighborhood, and it runs behind my yard and behind some yards of my neighbors. I would really like my little girls to go down and play along that creek. I have yet to go to my neighbors and ask permission of my neighbors for that to happen. My little girls, and maybe their kids, play all along this creek." He said, "What would it take to get me to go," he said, "to get me to go talk to my neighbors and ask for permission to make that happen?" I think that's a profound question in the sense that it has to do with cultural change. What are the individual decisions that people make, that families make, that parents make, that grandparents make, that kids themselves make? That's where we want to go. Programs can help us get there. But ultimately, we need to think about cultural change. I've been thinking recently, I'm working on an essay about what I call my 3-ring theory of social change. First ring is the program. Essentials have to happen more than ever. It's not going to happen by itself. They are limited, though, as many of you know, by a couple of things. One is budget. And it's going to not get easier in terms of the budget because of the economy. The other thing that limits them is that they're all going off into the same funders. And so they sometimes begin to look at other groups that are doing similar work as competitors. And they stop sometimes sharing their ideas. Ideas become proprietary. There's a sense of competition. That, to me, is a limitation. The best, and the limitations of budget, but they're still there. The second ring of these 3 rings are volunteers, docents, etc., who really do amazing work. We really owe so much in this country to that ring of social change. But that too is limited. That is limited by the budget of the programs who have to arrange for those volunteers and docents, etc. It's also limited, and this isn't often talked about, by a certain ambivalence that sometimes exists between the staffs of programs and the volunteers. If the volunteers can do it, why do they really need me as a paid staff person? That's sometimes under the surface. Again, the best programs and the best volunteer programs transcend that. But it's still out there. It's still kind of a barrier. So I've been thinking about this 3rd ring. I talked a lot when I was in Arizona a couple of weeks ago to the folks there, including the head of the Maricopa County park system, which apparently is the largest urban park system in the country. And we talked about the fact that we need to get beyond those first 2 rings. We need to strengthen those two rings. But this 3rd ring, in my mind, right, it's only partly formed. And again, this is in the form of a question to ask your help in thinking this through. What Chip and his family are doing, the family nature clubs, the idea that what if families began, what they left out had in that is that within a very short time, Chip started, he emailed me a few months ago and said his family had gotten inspired. They started going out on weekends. They have family nature adventures. One day the 5-year-old says to the dad, Dad, how come we're the only family having this much fun? And so Chip and his wife turned to their neighboring families. They started to engage them. Within a very short time, Chip had 170 families on his email list who were turning to each other, 2 families at a time, 3, 4 families at a time, essentially setting up weekend nature play dates for families. It deals with the fear, perceived safety and memory. It can be done in any neighborhood, urban or suburban, any kind of family, but a great thing is with the single parent family. To turn to other kinds of families, all kinds of families turning to each other. It deals with the funding issue. Nobody has to wait for funding. We can do it, and we can do it now. It deals with the lack of community. It deals with the probability that something actually will happen. You know, if you belong to a gym, how much more likely is it that you're going to show up on Wednesday night if you know that you got a buddy with you for it? A lot more likely. Same with these family leisure clubs. What if that one idea caught on and grew as fast as the block watches and the neighborhood watch program that caught on in the 70s and 80s? What if that happened across the country? Families turning to other families in all kinds of neighborhoods, all kinds of families. How do we facilitate that? What if the natural leaders idea, which I think also belongs in this third ring, what if that caught on? And the kids all over the country, and young people, 30 and younger, those are kids to me now, I guess. What if that caught on? And they began turning to each other and creating groups, clubs, etc. There's a couple of them that I've mentioned in the new edition of Last Child, and the kid who started Geeks in the Woods, you know, who got fed up with being put down because he liked video games, and he and his buddies got together and they said, well, we can like video games and like nature too. And now they get outside. It's great. Another little girl, 10 years old, got tired of going outside, nobody out there to play with, so she formed a club where her girlfriends go on bug hunts together. They call it Girls Gone Wild. What if those kind of self-actualizing, self-activating, cultural things happen all over the country and began to happen fast? That's in the third ring. When I talked to Maricopa County folks, they were talking about they have some programs to give people outdoors, and they're under-enrolled. So it's in their interest to go out and help build this third ring. What's in it for the programs? This third ring has no limitation in how far it can grow. There's no budgetary limitation. There's no limitation in terms of competition. They're not competing for money. And the bigger the third ring grows, the more constituency there is, both politically and financially, in terms of just general support for the program and the volunteers for the first 2 rings. So, in my mind at least, I think that we need to focus on strengthening the programs, absolutely. Strengthening the volunteer programs, absolutely. But we also have to begin to think in terms of this third ring in order to make that strengthening possible. That's cultural change. That would perhaps be an answer to that man who stood up a year ago and said, what would it take to get me to go and talk to my neighbors about getting permission to 5-year-old and other kids to play along that creek? So that would be my plea to you, to think beyond the sometimes frustrating limitations that we all feel. And think about this third ring as a way to build all of that, all of them. So thanks for coming, and I'm really looking forward to today. And I think it's going to be fun.